Well, thank you very much, and it is a pleasure to be here and help set the scene for the Premier's address on the state of Victoria. In the title to my talk, I've, as you see, referenced Trump as shorthand for a set of issues that have been around for a while but suddenly emerged from the shadows. We've had Brexit, now Trump, as illustrating a pushback by a large segment of the community in developed economies against what they see as adverse outcomes of open markets and globalisation. The election of Trump has placed in sharp relief the dichotomy between the beneficiaries and the left behinds of the global knowledge economy over the last 2 decades. In developing countries, those working in the high-skilled service occupations, probably including most of the people here, have been the beneficiaries, and those lesser skilled working in manufacturing and low-skilled services have missed out. How do these issues play out in the context of the Victorian economy? What are the key factors that need to be considered to preserve the richness of globalisation while providing opportunities for those left behind? So I'm going to talk about the resilience of the Victorian economy, overcoming a couple of major challenges in the last 7 or 8 years, its transformation into a service economy and implications for trade opportunities, then talk briefly about immigration, diversity and how they relate to the benefits of the open economy, and finally some policy suggestions for the Trump era. So I'll start with the growth rates in gross state product, GSP, and population since the beginning of the century. In this decade and a half, Victoria's growth in GDP has been robust. Not surprisingly, the GFC, the world's most serious recession since the 1930s, is the dividing line for this period, although its impact was less pronounced here than other parts of the developed world. Nonetheless, growth was stronger in the period to 2008 than for the more challenging period since. In the first period, average growth was about 3.2%, much in line with the national of 3.4%, while in the post-GFC period, Victoria has grown at an average of 1.8% compared with a national average of 2.5%. With the uptick, however, in the most recent GSP number, the signs are good that Victoria is adjusting well to the end of the mining boom. Excuse me. Population growth has increased steadily at an average of about 1.5%, rising to about 1.75% for the second half. The largest component of population growth is migration, which both drives and is driven by economic growth. In the first half of the period, economic growth was substantially higher than in population growth, and GSP per capita, that green line, increased by almost 2% per annum, while it has only edged up a little since. Victoria's growth has been driven by rapid growth in services, and these remain GSP numbers, that has transformed it from a manufacturing to a predominantly services economy. In the first period, this was broad-based, but in the second, the economy was being led by growth of up to 4% in professional services, health, education and finance. Manufacturing has lost sector share, although despite the bad press, it has held up reasonably well, with value added declining largely in the second period at about 1%. The question about whether my voice is going to hold up. I've had the Melbourne cold. The impact of this structural change is somewhat starker. However, when we look at it by employment, the share of manufacturing employment is down by over 6 percentage points, delivering significant pain for those who have worked in the sector. The transition has been assisted, however, by rapid growth in construction and the strength of the transport sector that have provided jobs for the less skilled. But the most significant expansion has taken place in the services sector. Healthcare, risen by 3.5 percentage points at a growth rate of over 4%. Professional services up 1.5 percentage points, growth rate of over 3%. Other significant sectors done well include accommodation and food services, education, financial services. The transition into a services economy has expanded our export capabilities. The decline of our motor manufacturing industry is made much of, but the increase in our services exports receives less attention. Over the decade and a half, services exports have increased by 6.4% per annum, while goods and exports bit up and bit down, but an average of only 0.4% per annum. The recovery in the period you see since the GFC has been led by exports in unprocessed primary products, increasing by about 11% per annum. However, it is services exports that have provided the most consistent growth. The very idea of services exports is, of course, relatively novel. The received wisdom was that services need to be personally delivered and therefore were not exportable. While that remains true of many, the development of greater international linkages and the wonder of the internet has radically reduced those constraints. The sector that I work in, education, has been the most important of the services exports, and one where they continue to be personally delivered, although that's changing rapidly with increasing online content. Like other exports, education is highly sensitive to the value of the currency. That and changed visa requirements led to a fall immediately following the GFC, but there's been a rapid recovery in the last few years and growth of 10% per annum since bottoming in 2012. Monash, Melbourne and RMIT universities are amongst the top 10 exporters in the state. Education, while important itself, has also been critical for transforming Melbourne into a cultural capital, which is globally networked. Many of the students who train here find ways of staying on and add significantly to the high skill levels of the workforce. I'll come back in a moment. However, I just wanted to note in this chart the recent rapid growth in professional and consulting services. There's enormous opportunity in the region for business services. High rates of growth for imports for such services in China and India in particular. It is especially encouraging to see rapid growth in these exports in recent years. The average growth for the period since 2001 is over 11%. And I shouldn't exclude mention of tourism, which has also been important. None of this is possible without considerable entrepreneurial spirit. Exporting is tough, and gaining access to offshore markets, overcoming regulatory and language difficulties is challenging, especially in China. That a group of academics, not typically renowned for their entrepreneurship, have created one of the state's largest export industries has always struck me as remarkable. It illustrates what can be done with skill and perseverance and when there is a good opportunity. Education services is strongly linked to our very successful immigration program, which has been critically important for the acquisition and expansion of relevant skills for our economy. Work by a colleague has shown that migrants are filling between 30 and 50% of key science and technology-based occupations. Most of the economic analysis conducted in this country is focused on these important skills-related benefits. However, we've been working on a study for the government on the economic impact of cultural diversity. Not migration per se, but the benefits arising from a more culturally diverse population and therefore workforce. Diversity, not by gender, but by such measures as ethnicity, place of birth, religion and language. Now, I'm not in a position to disclose the results of the report ahead of its much-awaited release to the Minister, but from what has already been made public, I can say that we have found a significant relationship between increasing diversity and income per worker. There are strong links between changing mainstream food tastes, the export of new food crops, and the backgrounds of the exporting entrepreneurs and the markets to which they have access. For as an example, export of nuts and pulses, I've never really come across them before, largely to India and other Asian markets has increased from less than 100 million in 2005 to over 800 million in 2015. The benefits of greater diversity are outlined in the extensive international literature, which has found evidence of diversity producing greater innovation, entrepreneurship and new firm formation, trade and access to international markets. These benefits have been gained in Victoria by an open and increasingly globally networked city and state economy. However, this has produced a two-speed society, one that is internationally engaged, the other that is missing out. We see that in the geography of Melbourne, which John Daly of the Grattan has described as a tale of two cities. One is an inner middle ring with good transport and accessibility to high quality growth to jobs, and an outer zone remote from work with poor public transport, among other disadvantages. The government's infrastructure plans are important in this regard. Most of us know that Trump's victory on a protectionist and nostalgic agenda to return America to a more certain, relatively affluent and less divided post-war period faces severe implementation challenges. However, many of the people who turned out to vote for him, especially poorly educated white males, have been dispossessed by the forces of globalisation. The benefits have been captured predominantly by the better educated knowledge workers. The same dichotomy exists in Australia. To preserve the benefits of globalisation and hold back the forces of protectionism, I think we need to find ways of more effectively sharing the benefits. We've published work in The Lancet recently, undertaken with colleagues at the WHO, on the significant economic as well as social returns to investing in health, thereby adding to the substantial literature on such returns to education. So, for me, the solutions lie not in closing the door on globalisation, but in the continued and equitable investment in education and health, reducing the tax distortions favouring the wealthy, and well-targeted infrastructure investment to give the widest possible opportunity for all to share in the benefits of a globally connected world. Thank you.